The Galactic Council chamber glittered with crystalline arches and polished obsidian floors, a room designed to intimidate lesser species into reverence. Tonight, it smelled faintly of panic. Delegates from 50 starfaring civilizations crowded the hall, their voices overlapping in frantic tones. A projection hovered in the center. A star system once marked as uninhabited now blazed with the unmistakable signals of rapid colonization. Energy grids stitched across planets, orbital docks spun up, and, most offensive of all, warships prowled the system's edges with the swagger of ownership. "This cannot be accurate," hissed Counselor Savar, his tentacles twitching like broken antennae. "This system was abandoned centuries ago. It was quarantined. It was empty." The projection zoomed closer, revealing crude but effective human starships. They looked less like sleek vessels of the galactic norm and more like flying scrapyards held together by stubbornness and duct tape. Graffiti sprawled across their hulls in bright, unreadable lettering. One ship's bow bore a grinning shark mouth, another sported what appeared to be a crude cartoon coyote holding dynamite. "Humans," said Archivist Iller, her translucent voice trembling, "is the species of Earth. They were lost millennia ago. Their homeworld was deemed unstable. Reports said they self-destructed." Savar's glare darkened. "Self-destructed species do not build fleets. Someone must explain how they have reemerged and why they claim ownership of a solar system." A murmur swept the chamber. The word humans meant different things to different races. To some, it was a half-remembered curiosity from obscure records, a mammalian biped obsessed with noise and combustion. To others, it was a campfire horror story, whispered in soldier barracks, a primitive brute that once fought wars over flags and songs. To most, it was simply forgotten. Archivist Iller flicked through her records, holograms of dusty files. Their culture was strange. They worshipped celebrity figures, consumed endless moving pictures, and conducted ritual dances while consuming carbonated poisons. The files mention a fixation on, she squinted, professional wrestling. "I never understood if it was sport, theater, or religion." Several delegates groaned. None of this reassured them. While the council sputtered, light years away, the supposed extinct species was throwing a barbecue in orbit. The human colony ship, Independence II, Electric Boogaloo, anchored proudly above the fifth planet, blasting an old Earth song through external speakers. The track, complete with screeching electric guitars, confused alien reconnaissance drones, which reported it as a form of sonic weaponry. On the ship's deck, Admiral Jack Maddox leaned against the railing, chewing on a piece of jerky as though the galaxy hadn't just rediscovered his people. He wore a patched leather jacket over his uniform, his hair an untamed storm of silver streaks. Maddox had been born in exile on the rogue colony world they called New Jersey Prime, a planet that had drifted in darkness for centuries. Survival there had not bred diplomacy, it had bred audacity. Admiral called his second-in-command, Lieutenant Torres, a woman whose grin was sharper than most knives. "Scouts just pinged us. Locals are curious. Should I cue the welcome package?" Maddox didn't hesitate. "Fire up the grills and get the karaoke screens ready. If they're coming, might as well make a good first impression." A chorus of cheers erupted from the crew. These weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were mechanics, miners, and farmers who'd learned that outwitting nature's cruelty meant leaning into insanity. Their ships carried missile racks next to pizza ovens, their command codes were embedded in mixtapes, and their battle drills were indistinguishable from dance-offs. When the first alien envoy ship arrived, a sleek, crystalline vessel brimming with sensors, the humans greeted it with beer cans launched in zero-G and a massive banner that read, "Welcome to the party." Inside the envoy ship, the alien captain struggled to interpret the chaotic signals. His translator crackled, attempting to digest human slang. "Yo," Maddox said, his voice broadcast directly. "You guys want some ribs? We've been marinating these babies for a week." The translator paused. "Marinating offspring for 7 planetary rotations." The alien captain's frills stiffened in horror. Maddox continued, oblivious. "Grab a plate, pull up a chair. Hell, I'll even let you pick the next karaoke track. But fair warning, we take Bon Jovi real seriously around here." The translator seized, emitted sparks, and promptly exploded. The alien envoy retreated in terror. Maddox turned to Torres with a smirk. "Think they liked us?" Back at the council, reports arrived of what the envoy had witnessed. Descriptions were fragmented but alarming. Humans had established orbital control, their ships radiated unorthodox energy patterns, and their communication consisted of nonsensical riddles and hostile music frequencies. One general slammed his claw on the table. They annihilated themselves once. Let us ensure it is permanent this time. Assemble a fleet. Sivar nodded grimly. Send a peacekeeping force. Humble them before their party spreads further. But Iller whispered more to herself than anyone. Peacekeeping may not be the word you seek. If the archives are correct, they thrive in conflict. Unaware of the Council's decision, the humans kept right on celebrating. They claimed the solar system as their own, planting flags on planets with the casual arrogance of backyard conquerors. Their declaration was simple: dibs. Maddox stood on the bridge of his flagship as Torres brought the latest intel. Admiral, scouts report a fleet inbound. Looks fancy, lots of lights. Probably not here for karaoke. Maddox exhaled slowly, his eyes gleaming with the kind of reckless excitement that had kept their colony alive through centuries of exile. Perfect. Cue the soundtrack. What's the opener? Torres asked. Thunderstruck, Maddox replied without hesitation. The first power chord roared through space as the human fleet surged to life. Engines belched flame like drag racers at a starting line. Crew members slipped on aviator sunglasses despite being indoors, their movements synchronized to the music. The peacekeeping fleet emerged from hyperspace in immaculate formation, weapons shimmering with precision. To the Council's watching eyes, it was supposed to be a demonstration of order overwhelming chaos. Instead, the first volley of human missiles screamed through space, each painted with neon graffiti, each carrying a warhead, and a speaker blasting riffs. The aliens never stood a chance. Their formations fractured, their sensors blinded by strobe lights projected from human ships. Explosions rocked the void in rhythm with the song, turning battle into choreography. Within minutes, the fleet was in retreat, limping back across the stars with tales of a nightmare made flesh. On his bridge, Maddox leaned back in his chair, casually tossing a peanut into his mouth. Well, he said, grinning, that should send the message. Torres smirked. What message exactly? Maddox turned toward the stars, his grin sharp as broken glass. That the galaxy thought we were extinct. Turns out, we were just waiting for the right moment to crash the party. And across the void, every council chamber, every palace, every warlord's lair began to whisper the same word with dawning dread. The council had expected humanity's first victory to be an accident, a lucky strike born of primitive desperation. What unsettled them most was that it hadn't looked accidental at all. The human fleet had fought with the coordination of veterans, with improvisation so smooth it seemed rehearsed, and with a reckless joy that chilled species accustomed to solemn wars. Rumors spread faster than couriers. Humans didn't just win battles, they seemed to celebrate them. In the days that followed, the galaxy learned something even stranger. Instead of consolidating quietly, the hidden human colony immediately began expanding. Terraforming drones spread across nearby moons, slapping together crude habitats in record time. Their tools were laughably outdated, yet they made progress with terrifying speed. One alien observer reported that the humans had converted a barren rock into a functioning outpost using nothing but mining lasers, scrap metal, and what appeared to be several thousand gallons of a fermented ethanol beverage. At the center of this chaos stood Admiral Jack Maddox, who wore command like a man hosting a backyard barbecue. He strolled through the Independence II's command deck as if it were a sports bar, stopping to fist-bump gunners and swap jokes with technicians. Lieutenant Torres, his second-in-command, often trailed behind him, clipboard in hand, trying to wrangle strategy out of what looked suspiciously like chaos. "Admiral, we need a plan for dealing with the Council's response," she said one morning, as the crew blasted a decades-old Bon Jovi track during maintenance drills. Maddox stretched in his chair, one leg slung over the armrest. "Plan simple, Torres. They show up, we beat 'em, we grill steaks. Rinse, repeat." Torres pinched the bridge of her nose. "That's not a strategy. That's tailgating with extra steps." "Exactly," Maddox replied, a grin tugging at his lips. "And it works." Meanwhile, the alien species sent to parley with humanity found themselves hopelessly outmatched, not by weapons, but by communication. One delegation attempted diplomacy, only for Maddox to insist the talks be held during a cookout. When offered a ceremonial gift of crystal insignias, Maddox responded by handing over a six-pack of beer and a mixed tape labeled Greatest Hits, Journey, AC/DC, Meat Loaf. The alien dignitaries assumed this was some form of coded threat. It was Torres who tried to bridge the gap, leaning across the table with her practiced smile. "What the Admiral means," she explained, "is that we value cultural exchange." "Damn right," Maddox added, raising his glass. "Nothing says friendship like blasting karaoke at midnight." The translator sputtered, producing fractured nonsense. "Friendship requires midnight acoustic assault." The alien envoys fled, convinced they'd narrowly survive a ritual of human war chants. Word of these encounters spread like wildfire across the stars. Populations once indifferent to humanity now whispered of them as demons in denim, warriors who weaponized laughter and sound. Young aliens began imitating human speech patterns, adopting phrases like radical and cowabunga with alarming enthusiasm. Governments, terrified of cultural collapse, issued strict bans on human music, which only made it spread faster through smuggling channels. Not every alien species feared them, however. Some saw opportunity. Pirate clans, long outcasts from civilized space, found themselves drawn to the humans' chaos. A flotilla of raiders appeared at the edges of the human-claimed system, expecting to fight. Instead, Maddox invited them aboard for pizza. Hours later, the pirates had pledged loyalty in exchange for a steady supply of Earth media and pepperoni slices. The Council could no longer deny that humanity was not only surviving but thriving, and worse, infecting others with their unruly culture. To them, humanity wasn't just a military threat, it was a contagion. They resolved to send a true test. The Zorith, a warrior race bred for conquest, infamous for reducing resistant planets to ash. When the Zorith armada arrived, sleek and brutal in its formation, the humans treated it as a challenge rather than a threat. Maddox gathered his officers around the hollow table, where enemy formations glowed menacingly. Torres gestured to the display. "That's a disciplined fleet. Precision strikes, overwhelming numbers, ships that make ours look like toys. How do you want to counter?" Maddox rubbed his chin thoughtfully, then snapped his fingers. "Disco." The room fell silent. "Disco." Torres repeated. "Yeah. Ever see how people move when they hear staying alive? Pure chaos. We throw some lights, crank the beats, and these bug-eyed bastards won't know what hit them." Against all reason, the plan worked. As the Zorith advanced, human ships deployed colossal reflective spheres, literal disco balls, into the battlefield. Laser beams ricocheted wildly, blinding sensors. Simultaneously, the fleet jammed enemy communications with a relentless stream of Earth's most obnoxious hits. Macarena, Who Let the Dogs Out, and the unholy weapon of choice, Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. The Zorith faltered, their formations breaking apart as confusion mounted. Some ships fired upon their allies in the glare of the mirrored chaos. Others simply fled, their commanders unable to bear the auditory torment. In less than an hour, the once feared armada was reduced to scattered wrecks and deserters. When the smoke cleared, Torres looked at Maddox in disbelief. "You just defeated the galaxy's most dangerous warriors with a party playlist." Maddox shrugged, tossing her a grin. "Hey, never underestimate the classics." The crew erupted in cheers, but Torres felt the weight of what had just happened. Each victory emboldened humanity, but also painted a larger target on their backs. The Council wouldn't keep underestimating them. Their enemies would grow stronger, their responses more desperate. Still, when she glanced at her admiral, sipping a beer as though they'd merely won a bar bet, she couldn't help but smile. Maddox embodied everything maddening and magnetic about their people, reckless, unpredictable, but impossible to ignore. As the humans expanded deeper into the system, banners planted and pirate allies swelling their ranks, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. For the first time in millennia, power trembled. The Council's neat order had been upended by a species that laughed at danger and turned warfare into spectacle. And though Torres worried what storm they were summoning, Maddox seemed perfectly at ease, staring out into the stars with that same defiant grin. "Let 'em come," he murmured almost to himself. "The galaxy thinks it can handle us, but it hasn't seen anything yet." Galactic news feeds could not look away. Every major channel looped the same impossible footage. A species once written off as a cosmic footnote had just humiliated the Zorith, a warrior race that had terrorized the stars for millennia. Anchors struggled to describe what they had witnessed. Some called it an unprecedented tactical deception, others a cultural plague, but most whispered the word that was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire: humans. Panic erupted in the council chambers. Civilizations that had lived in rigid hierarchies for centuries now feared collapse, not from conquest, but from infiltration of human culture. In marketplaces once filled with solemn chants, alien teenagers strutted in denim jackets and sunglasses, speaking in slang lifted from intercepted human broadcasts. Whole worlds were infected with music they couldn't stop humming. Diplomatic analysts described it as a mimetic invasion, a form of warfare more dangerous than any fleet. Admiral Maddox, meanwhile, treated the galaxy's meltdown with all the seriousness of a man deciding which playlist to cue next. On the bridge of the Independence, too, he lounged in his usual slouch pose, tossing a baseball from hand to hand. Lieutenant Torres stood at his side, reviewing reports with grim efficiency. "Admiral, the Council is mobilizing. We've got eyes on their fleets massing near the borders. We should expect retaliation soon." Maddox caught the baseball, let roll across his knuckles, and smirked. "Retaliation, sure. But look at the bigger picture, Torres. We're in their heads. They can't fight what they don't understand." "They don't understand us because we don't make sense," she shot back. "Half our fleet is powered by salvaged reactors and bad ideas. That doesn't make us invincible, Jack. It makes us reckless." Maddox leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. "Reckless worked pretty damn well against the bugs, didn't it?" She wanted to argue, but the truth was undeniable. His unorthodox tactics had saved them again and again. Yet Torres also saw the cost of his approach. Each victory pushed them further into the galaxy's spotlight. Each celebration painted a bigger target on their backs. The wider colony reflected that same duality. On one hand, daily life aboard human ships looked more like a floating block party than a disciplined fleet. Pizza delivery drones zipped between cruisers. Karaoke tournaments determined shifts. Pilots blasted the Top Gun soundtrack in cockpits as though it were holy ritual. Even children ran around with toy blasters, mimicking their admiral's swagger. On the other hand, the colony worked with a fevered determination born of survival. Generations on New Jersey Prime had bred a culture that never trusted safety to last. Mechanics reinforced hulls with obsessive care, farmers tinkered with hydroponics until they could coax green life from barren rocks, and engineers pushed crude reactors to their absolute limits. The humans laughed, but their laughter hid steel. Word of this dual nature reached the Council through spies, and it drove them mad. They debated endlessly about how to contain humanity. Some called for annihilation, others for strict quarantine. A few argued for diplomacy, but their voices were drowned out by fear. In one particularly heated session, a nervous scholar addressed the chamber. "We once cataloged their culture as nonsense. But that nonsense is working. They wield chaos the way we wield precision. They adapt faster than we can plan. And worse, others are starting to imitate them." Indeed, pirate clans weren't the only ones flocking to humanity. Entire fringe worlds, long dismissed by the Council, declared allegiance to Maddox's colony. They adored the human ethos, irreverence, defiance, the promise of freedom wrapped in rock anthems and sarcasm. For those crushed under galactic bureaucracy, humanity looked less like a threat and more like salvation. Maddox, of course, welcomed them with open arms and pizza. His alliance grew stronger with each bizarre conversion. Yet Torres worried about the strain. Their improvised infrastructure could barely support themselves, let alone an expanding coalition. She confronted Maddox during a rare quiet moment in his quarters. "Jack, you can't keep treating this like a road trip. We're building something here, whether you want to admit it or not. These people believe in us. If we screw this up, they don't have anywhere else to go." Maddox sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. For once, the grin slipped. "You think I don't know that? I act like I've got it all figured out, because if I don't, everyone sees the cracks. Truth is, Torres, I never planned to lead anything. I just wanted to keep us alive." Her expression softened. For all his bravado, Maddox carried the weight of their people in silence. She realized then that his humor wasn't denial, it was armor. Without it, the enormity of what they were doing might crush him. Before she could respond, alarms blared. A transmission cut through their comms, not from the Council, but from a neutral relay. It showed an alien cleric, robed in solemn symbols, standing before a congregation. He raised a rectangular object with reverence. "Behold," he declared, "the sacred artifact of the humans." The camera zoomed in. In his hands was a battered VHS tape of Space Jam. Gasps erupted from the congregation. The cleric continued. "The humans follow the path of the trickster rabbit and the warrior Jordan. They teach us through moving picture prophecy. To deny them is to deny destiny. The humans watching the broadcast erupted in laughter, nearly falling out of their chairs. Maddox grinned until tears filled his eyes. "We've got a cult now. Over Bugs Bunny. Oh, this is too good." Torres, however, didn't laugh. She saw what it meant. Humanity wasn't just disrupting politics. They were reshaping belief. Whole societies were reinterpreting their myths through fragments of Earth culture. The Council couldn't stop it. Every ban, every blockade only made human influence spread faster. And with influence came fear. Reports arrived of massive fleets gathering at the system's edge. The Council had run out of patience. This time, they weren't sending scouts or warriors. They were preparing a full-scale coalition strike. Torres stood beside Maddox on the bridge as the news broke. Her face was pale, but her voice steady. "They're coming, Jack. Not a token force. Everyone. They want to end us before we infect the galaxy completely." Maddox didn't flinch. Instead, he rose from his chair, adjusted his jacket, and looked out into the stars as though they were the lights of a stage waiting for him to step forward. "Then we give them a show," he said quietly. The crew cheered, but Torres heard the edge in his voice. The next battle wouldn't be a skirmish. It would be survival. And as the humans braced for the storm, the galaxy held its breath, wondering if order could possibly withstand the beautiful, terrifying madness of mankind. This section is 980 words, escalating the stakes, deepening Maddox and Torres as characters, and showing how humanity's chaos becomes a cultural contagion. It ends with the setup for the massive coalition assault, pulling the reader straight into the climax. The coalition fleet arrived like a wall of steel and fire stretching across the void, thousands of ships aligned in flawless formations. Every major civilization of the Council had contributed to this armada, not merely to crush humanity, but to make an example of them. The message was clear. Chaos would not be tolerated in a galaxy built on order. To the Council, the humans were not rebels or conquerors, but a contagion that had to be burned out before it spread beyond control. On the bridge of the Independence II, Admiral Jack Maddox leaned against the console as if the galaxy's largest armada weren't preparing to erase him from existence. He squinted at the holographic display, tilting his head as though he were sizing up an opposing team before a high school football game. Lieutenant Torres stood beside him, her face pale in the blue glow, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. Maddox popped a piece of gum into his mouth, chewed, and smirked. "Good. Saves us the trouble of hunting them down later." Torres shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "This isn't funny, Jack. We're outnumbered 50-1. Maybe more. If we lose here, we don't just lose the system, we lose everything we've built." Her words carried the weight of every colonist who had entrusted them with survival, every child playing in hydroponic parks, every mechanic patching hull plates with stubborn grit. Maddox met her gaze, the smirk fading into something harder. "I know what's at stake, Torres. I know better than anyone. That's why we can't fight this battle their way. If we try to match order with order, we're already dead. But if we remind them who we are, maybe we stand a chance." The humans prepared in their own peculiar style. Ships painted slogans on their hulls. "No parking, born to run, you mess with Jersey, you get the wrench." Pilots slipped on aviator sunglasses, engineers duct-taped extra armor to their reactors, and somewhere in the fleet, a group of teenagers spray-painted Bugs Bunny on the side of a battlecruiser with the words, "Thy trickster God protects us." When the first coalition transmission came through, it was a cold demand for surrender. Maddox answered with a grin, holding a microphone patched through the comms. "This is Admiral Jack Maddox of the human colony. We appreciate the visit, but this is our party, and you're not invited. Unless you brought beer. Did you bring beer?" Static silence followed. Then the coalition opened fire. The void erupted into light. Beams of plasma carved through the darkness. Missiles streaked like falling stars, and the disciplined might of the galaxy descended upon a ragtag fleet that should not have survived the first volley. But humans did not meet fire with fire. They met it with insanity. Decoy ships inflated from compressed tanks, giant balloons shaped like the Millennium Falcon, Scooby-Doo's mystery machine, and one that appeared to be a colossal rubber duck. Coalition targeting systems locked onto them immediately, wasting barrages of firepower on holographic and inflatable nonsense. Meanwhile, the real human fleet dove into the fray with reckless abandon. Their ships juked and spun to the rhythm of blaring rock anthems, engines roaring as if trying to outsing the music. Maddox barked orders like a conductor at a symphony, each command disguised as a movie quote. The crew understood perfectly. When he shouted wax on, wax off, half the fleet rotated into defensive position. When he growled yippee-ki-yay, torpedo bays opened and unleashed havoc. The coalition's discipline became their weakness. Their formations crumbled under the unpredictable assault, their captains struggling to adapt to opponents who treated warfare like a contact sport. Windows 95 viruses infiltrated their targeting software, forcing warships to reboot in the middle of battle. Some crews mutinied after being subjected to hours of Bohemian Rhapsody, pumped through their comms at maximum volume. But victory wasn't easy. Human ships burned, hulls ruptured, lives were lost. Torres worked furiously at Maddox's side, rerouting power, directing reinforcements, barking orders with precise clarity where Maddox's flamboyance left gaps. When a cruiser drifted powerless under heavy fire, she dispatched rescue frigates without hesitation. She was the steel spine behind Maddox's wild grin, the one who kept their chaos from collapsing into ruin. At the battle's height, the coalition unleashed its flagship, a colossal dreadnought bristling with weapons capable of scouring planets. It dwarfed the Independence too, blotting out the stars. As its cannons charged, silence fell across the human fleet. Even Maddox's grin faltered for a heartbeat. Torres whispered, "We can't take that thing head on." Maddox's jaw tightened. "Then we don't. We go under it." He ordered the fleet to converge, slingshotting around the dreadnought's hull like angry hornets. Boarding crews launched on jury-rigged shuttles, armed not just with rifles, but with crowbars, wrenches, and an unhealthy amount of duct tape. Inside the dreadnought, alien officers stumbled as corridors filled with blaring guitar riffs and the unmistakable chant of "Livin' on a Prayer." One human mechanic, grease-stained and grinning, saved the day by crawling into the reactor chamber, slapping duct tape over a critical coolant leak, and rerouting power with the words, "Don't worry, I saw this in a movie once." The dreadnought's weapons sputtered, overloaded, and finally shut down in a blaze of sparks. The coalition fleet broke. Without their flagship, their morale collapsed. Ships scattered, commanders screaming contradictory orders, their neat lines disintegrating in the face of human chaos. On the Independence, too, the bridge crew erupted in cheers as enemy signals blinked out. Torres allowed herself a rare smile, exhaustion etched into her face. "We did it," she whispered. Maddox stood at the viewport, staring at the wreckage glittering in the void. His grin returned, but was tinged with something heavier, almost sorrowful. "No, Torres. We survived. That's not the same thing." When the dust settled, humanity broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Maddox himself appeared on every channel, his leather jacket scorched, his hair wild, his eyes burning with defiance. "We don't want to rule you. We don't want your thrones, your taxes, or your boring council meetings. All we want is space to live, to breathe, and maybe throw a party without someone trying to crash it. This system is ours now. Respect that, and we'll respect you." Cross the line, he leaned closer, his grin sharp as ever. "And we'll show you just how crazy we can get." The transmission cut, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Some saw humanity as a nightmare, others as a beacon, but none could deny the truth. They were back, and they would not be ignored. That night, the humans celebrated on the hull of their captured dreadnought, turning it into an impromptu roller rink under the stars. Music thundered, children laughed, and alien refugees danced awkwardly beside them. For all the loss, for all the fire, humanity had carved a place in the galaxy once more. Torres watched the revelry from a distance, her gaze drifting to Maddox as he danced terribly in the crowd, laughing like a man who had cheated death one more time. She shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. Reckless, infuriating, unstoppable, he was everything the galaxy feared and everything their people needed. And as the stars stretched endlessly above them, she knew this was only the beginning.